The Japanese Imperial Navy announced her death 3 separate times. They celebrated. They gave medals to the pilots who sunk her. Even the Emperor was informed of her destruction. But every single time, out of the smoke and the mist, she would return, like a ghost. The sailors called her the Big E. The Japanese called her the Gray Ghost. And by the end of World War II, she would become the most decorated ship in the history of the United States Navy. 20 battle stars. While other ships fought in 1 or 2 major campaigns, the USS Enterprise fought in 20. From the shock of Pearl Harbor to the final gates of Tokyo. This isn't just the story of a machine made of 20,000 tons of steel. It is the story of a ship that seemed to have a soul, and the men who refused to let her die. The legend of the Enterprise began with a stroke of luck. On the morning of December 7, 1941, she was supposed to be docked at Pearl Harbor. If she had been there, she would have been a sitting duck, just like the Arizona or the Oklahoma. But on her way back from Wake Island, she encountered a heavy storm. The waves slowed her down. That storm saved the American Navy. She arrived the next evening. The crew stood on the deck in stunned silence. The harbor was black with oil and filled with the bodies of their comrades. The smell of burning flesh hung in the air. Admiral Halsey, standing on the bridge of the Enterprise, looked at the destruction and made a vow. Before we're through with them, the Japanese language will be spoken only in hell. The Enterprise refueled and left immediately. The war was on. In the early months, the U.S. was losing, but the Enterprise was everywhere. She escorted the Hornet for the Doolittle raid. She raided the Marshall Islands. The Japanese began to notice this one elusive carrier. She was fast, she hit hard, and she vanished before they could catch her.
June 1942. The Battle of Midway. The Japanese Navy brought 4 heavy carriers to finish what they started at Pearl Harbor. The U.S. had only 3, Yorktown, Hornet, and Enterprise. The odds were impossible, but the Enterprise had a secret weapon, her dive bombers, the SBD Dauntless. At 10:20 a.m., the war hung in the balance. The American torpedo bombers had been slaughtered. The Japanese Zeros were swarming low, but high above, unnoticed, were the dive bombers from the Enterprise, led by Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey. He saw the Japanese carriers below. Their decks were full of fuel and bombs. He tipped his wing. In 5 fatal minutes, the Enterprise pilots changed the course of history. They turned the Akagi and the Kaga into floating infernos. Later that day, they helped sink the Haryu. The Enterprise had broken the back of the Japanese Navy. But victory came at a price. Her sister ship, the Yorktown, was sunk. The Big E survived, but her darkest days were still ahead. After Midway, the war turned into a brutal slugfest in the Solomon Islands. It was a war of attrition, and the U.S. Navy was running out of ships. The Saratoga was torpedoed and sent for repairs. The Wasp was sunk. The Hornet, the Enterprise's sister, was bombed and sunk at the Battle of Santa Cruz. By late October 1942, the situation was terrifying. The United States had started the war with 7 carriers. Now they had 1. Just 1, the USS Enterprise. She was the only thing standing between the Japanese Navy and the west coast of America. The crew knew it. They were exhausted. The ship was damaged. Her forward elevator was broken. She was leaking oil. But they didn't quit. On the flight deck, the sailors painted a sign for the world to see: Enterprise vs. Japan. It wasn't a joke. It was the tactical reality. The Japanese knew she was the last one left. They threw everything at her. At the Battle of Santa Cruz, a bomb punched through the flight deck, exploding deep inside the ship. Another hit the forecastle. The ship shook violently. The rudder jammed. Dead in the water. If the Japanese planes returned, she was finished. This is where the legend of the Ghost was truly born. The Japanese pilots reported back, carrier burning, sinking, confirmed destroyed. Tokyo announced the victory, but inside the Enterprise, the damage control teams were working miracles. They fought the fires while the battle was still raging. They patched the holes with wood and mattresses. An hour later, the engines roared back to life. She picked up speed. She began launching planes again. After the Battle of Santa Cruz, the Enterprise was crippled, but the Marines on Guadalcanal were dying. They needed air support. Admiral Halsey gave the order, "Sail now, fixer on the way." It was unprecedented. The repair ship USS Vestal docked alongside, and 80 repairmen jumped onto the Enterprise. They worked day and night while the ship steamed toward the battle zone. They were welding patches on the hull while dive bombers were taking off right above their heads. November 13th, 1942, the naval battle of Guadalcanal. When the Japanese commanders looked through their binoculars, they froze. They saw a carrier. They checked their lists. Hornet, sunk. Wasp, sunk. Yorktown, sunk. Enterprise, supposedly sunk. So who is that? The Gray Ghost had returned from the dead, again. Her planes hunted down the Japanese battleship He. They finished her off. The psychological impact was devastating. A Japanese officer later wrote, "We felt that the Americans had an endless supply of carriers, or maybe they had a ship that was immortal." By the end of 1942, the tide had turned. The Enterprise had held the line, and now reinforcements were coming. 1944. The Pacific Ocean looked very different. The U.S. industrial machine had awakened. Dozens of new massive Essex-class carriers arrived. The Enterprise was no longer the lonely warrior. She was now the veteran grandmother of the fleet. She was refitted, new radar, new anti-aircraft guns, and most importantly, a new fighter plane, the F-6F Hellcat. June 19th, 1944, the Battle of the Philippine Sea. The Japanese launched a massive air attack, over 400 planes. In 1942, this would have been a death sentence, but in 1944, the Enterprise and her sisters were ready. The radar picked up the enemy 150 miles away. The Hellcat scrambled. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. The American pilots called it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. It was like shooting clay pigeons. In just a few hours, over 300 Japanese planes were shot down. The U.S. lost only about 30. The Enterprise alone claimed huge numbers. The Imperial Japanese Naval Air Service ceased to exist as an effective fighting force.
But a cornered animal is the most dangerous. By 1945, Japan had no experienced pilots left. They turned to a desperate, terrifying tactic: kamikaze, the divine wind, suicide attacks. They didn't need to be good pilots. They just needed to crash. And the Gray Ghost was their favorite target. May 14th, 1945, a kamikaze pilot named Tomi Zai, flying a Zero loaded with a 500-kilogram bomb, spotted the Enterprise. He dove. The anti-aircraft guns put up a wall of lead. The ship turned hard to starboard, but Zai was determined. He inverted his plane and crashed directly into the ship just behind the forward elevator. The impact was catastrophic. The explosion was so violent that it blew the ship's forward elevator, a slab of steel weighing 15 tons, 400 feet into the air. Witnesses on other ships watched the elevator spinning in the sky above the smoke. For the third time in the war, everyone thought, she's gone. But she didn't sink. Her hull held. Her engines kept turning. The Gray Ghost had taken a death blow to the heart and shrugged it off. She had to return to the U.S. for repairs, missing the final surrender in Tokyo Bay. But she had done her job. The war was won. When the Enterprise sailed into New York Harbor, the city stopped. Thousands of people lined the docks. She was the hero of the Pacific. She participated in Operation Magic Carpet, bringing over 10,000 soldiers home to their families. But then, the cheering stopped. The Navy had too many ships. The Enterprise was old, cramped, and damaged. Veterans launched a massive campaign to save her. They wanted to make her a national museum. Admiral Halsey himself begged Congress. She is the one ship that most nearly symbolizes the history of the U.S. Navy in World War II. But the money wasn't there. In 1958, the order was signed. It is one of the greatest tragedies in preservation history. The Japanese Navy threw everything they had at her, bombs, torpedoes, suicide planes, and couldn't destroy her. In the end, she was destroyed by American blowtorches in a scrapyard in New Jersey. The gray ghost was turned into razor blades and girders.
But you cannot kill a legend. Just 3 years later, the Navy launched a new ship, the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. They named her USS Enterprise. And in the fictional world, a creator named Gene Roddenberry was looking for a name for his starship in a new show called Star Trek. He chose the name Enterprise to honor the ship that refused to die. The steel is gone, but the spirit remains. Whenever a ship named Enterprise sails the ocean or the stars, the gray ghost is still on patrol. Did the U.S. make a mistake scrapping the Enterprise? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of the greatest ship that ever sailed, please hit that subscribe button. I'm Channel Name. Thanks for watching.